8, beginning to read at verse 1. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, 'The disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep.' If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Now let's keep our Bibles open because we're going to think a bit more about that. And if we could just go back to that slide we had while Ian was reading, and it said, count how many times you hear the word afraid. I wonder if anyone did that, and we'll come back to that. Remember that number. We'll come back to that. But for now, let's have a game of true or false. I'm going to say some things, and you have to decide whether you think they're true or false. Talk to the person next to you. I'm not going to make you announce publicly, so it won't be embarrassing if you get it wrong. But see what you think. First one, the angel rolled the stone away to let Jesus out because he was alive. Is that true or false? Talk to the person next to you and see whether you think that's true or false. Well, the answer is it's false, because Jesus was already gone from the tomb when the angel opened it, rolled the stone away and sat on the stone. Jesus was already gone. It wasn't to let Jesus out. Here's another one. The angel rolled the stone away to let witnesses in. Do you think this is true or false? See what the person next to you thinks. Now, if you're not sure, have a look, because I think we can work this out from verse 5. If you're on page 1000 in the Bible, Matthew chapter 28, verse 5, the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here, he's risen, just as he said." And then what did the angel tell the women to do? Come and see the place where he lay. So I think that's why the stone was rolled away. So it's true to let the witnesses in so they could see and tell other people that the tomb was empty. Now, why was the tomb empty? The tomb was empty because Jesus was keeping his promise. Is that true or false? See what the person next to you thinks. I think we're probably all agreed on this one, aren't we? Verse 6 said, he is not here, he is risen, just as he said. And then in verse 7, it was, he's going ahead of you into Galilee. That was something else Jesus had promised. He said, after I've risen, I'll go and meet you there. So the answer is true. Well done if you got that. Jesus always keeps his promises. And finally, the tomb was empty because death could not hold Jesus. Is that true as well as a reason? What do you think? I can see some people nodding. Maybe some people thinking, not sure. Because when somebody dies, they stay dead, don't they? I think it was Easter Day 2018 that Easter Day fell on April Fool's Day. Do you remember that? And we were in here and we had a visitor who hasn't been to church since. His name was Toby. Does anyone remember meeting Toby? Toby was our rabbit and he was the Easter bunny for the day in 2018. But the sad news was that a couple of months after that, Toby died. And we buried Toby in our garden. And I guess his body is still down there under the earth, what's left of it. And it was very sad for us. And if any of us have lost a pet, maybe we felt sad about that. If we've lost a person that we love, so much more. And the sad thing is, death doesn't let go. But what do we think about this up on the screen? The tomb was empty because death could not hold Jesus. Well, that is true. Jesus is different. Death couldn't hold him. Now, when we were counting, how many times did you hear the word afraid? Did anyone? George, you counted. 5. Anyone else? Anyone get anything different to 5? Teddy? 3. And is that James at the back? No, who's that? Have your hand up. No, you don't want to shout out? Nigel? Oh, you're telling me about Megan. You counted 4. I counted 4 as well, but I'm not always brilliant at counting. I think it's 4, certainly in verses 1 to 10. And then there's some kind of fear in verses 11 to 15 as well. But fear is something that can make a big difference to our lives. And I think we've seen that a lot over the last couple of years, where we've been frightened of catching a horrible virus and getting ill, or frightened of giving the virus to somebody vulnerable, and frightened to get together with other people. Maybe some people are feeling a bit frightened about being here now, and others of us feeling how wonderful it, or perhaps at the same time, all of us feeling how wonderful it is to be able to be together again on Easter Day after so long. But there are different kinds of fear. And these 4 examples of fear in the passage, the first one was fear and fainting. If you've got your Bible open at page 1000, look at page Matthew 28 again, verse 4. The guards who'd been given the job of making sure nobody came and stole Jesus' body, so they were guarding the tomb, the guards were so afraid of him, that's the angel, that they shook and became like dead men. Can you picture that? They shook and became like dead men. I wonder if just where you're sitting, you could do an impression of that. And who'd like to do some shaking and become like a dead man? Somebody's done it very well over there. Okay, now that some of you have had a practice at that, would anyone like to come up and demonstrate what it looks like to shake and become like a dead man? Digby, yours was brilliant. Would you come and do it? No. Digby shakes and becomes like a dead man at the thought of doing that in front of the church. Anybody? Because you want to, Grace? No? Ben? No? I'll do it then, okay. So they were so frightened because it was as though they'd seen a ghost, but they'd seen an angel, which is a really powerful thing. Sometimes we think of angels as being sort of fluffy and with wings, but they're from God's army. And this one had rolled the stone away, was sitting on it, and his appearance was like lightning. So such a frightening thing. These soldiers were, even though they were tough men, overwhelmed by this power. And then the next, who else was afraid? Well, in verse 5, the angel said to the women, that's Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, don't be afraid. They were afraid. Verse 1, what were they doing? Well, they went to look at the tomb. So their friend, Jesus, who they loved, had died. And when we go to visit the tomb of a loved one, we might be feeling very sad, even after a long period of time. But for Mary and the other Mary, it all happened so quickly because only 3 days earlier, Jesus was alive and well and eating and drinking with them. And then now all those terrible things had happened, and he's in the tomb, and the soldiers and the religious leaders had done nasty things to Jesus, and they were very afraid as they went to the tomb. Can we see some sad and frightened faces? It's quite difficult to do a face when you know people do a sad face without laughing, but yeah, I see some sad faces around there. But then there's still more fear. Even after the angel had said, do not be afraid, what happened in verse 8? The women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell the disciples. So that's a strange mixture, isn't it? I wonder if you've ever felt that, afraid and happy at the same time. Maybe if you've been on a fairground ride, you felt afraid and happy at the same time. Somehow, the good news is dawning on these women that Jesus is alive. The angels told them, and they're believing it. They're starting to believe it. So they're filled with joy. Jesus is alive. But we're at his tomb and the soldiers are there and there's an angel. They're still really afraid as well. And so they ran to tell the disciples. Could we have a few people demonstrate some running whilst looking afraid and happy? So everyone under the age of 13, stand up, find somewhere to run there and back looking afraid and happy. Go. I thought they really did look afraid and happy as they ran, didn't they? There are some more still at the back, running, looking afraid and happy. And finally, in verse 10, and then you can finish your run whenever you like. Finally, Jesus said to them, don't be afraid. And I think this time they've stopped being afraid altogether. Would you two come on then, as you're so good at demonstrating, can you two come and join me at the front here? Will one of you pretend to be Jesus? Who's going to be Jesus? You, okay. So you stand there, and then what you have to do is get hold of his feet. Can you grab his feet? That's it. So they grabbed hold of Jesus' feet. Well done, boys. Thank you. So you guys can go back to your seats. They saw Jesus. First of all, they'd been to his tomb and it was really sad. Then they heard that he was alive and they started to believe it. They were happy and still afraid. And then they saw him and all the fear went away because they could actually touch him. He had real solid feet that they could grab hold of. And why is it his feet that they grabbed hold of? Well, because he's so great. He's the king of everything. He's defeated death and he's the Lord over the whole universe. And so they bowed down before him to worship him and grabbed hold of his feet, and all their fear was gone. And they went off to tell the others. So as we meet with Jesus now, who's still alive today, he can drive out all our fear. And if we're afraid, let's come to Jesus. Maybe imagine grabbing hold of his feet and honoring him as Lord of all. And then he gives us the freedom from fear and the confidence to go and tell other people that he's alive. And what we're going to do next, is tell one another the great truths, the good news. Let's declare our faith in the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let's stand up together. And if you're able to join in with this, it'd be really good to say this confidently and joyfully together. Let us declare our faith in the resurrection